The third instrument panel had flatlined, and the human was still standing. That was the moment I stopped treating this as a routine assessment. The first two panels I had attributed to calibration error. The third I could not explain at all, and I was the senior xenobiologist on staff at the Veraki Institute. With 41 years of species profile work behind me, I did not have calibration errors. What I had, I was beginning to understand, was a problem of category. The human's name was in the intake file. I won't record it here. What I will record is what the instruments told me, because the instruments are the only part of this report that cannot be argued with. He had been brought in 4 days prior. A captured reconnaissance operative, taken without a firefight, which was itself notable. All equipment had been stripped and catalogued at Checkpoint Veth. No augmentation was found. No subdermal hardware, no neural interface, no biochemical supplementation in the blood panel beyond what appeared to be natural metabolic products. He was, by every scan we ran, an unmodified biological organism. Adult male, the species standard build for operational roles, denser than our models predicted, within the documented range. The Compact Authority Liaison, Director Soren Kale, had requested the assessment personally. The Compact's threat tier file on humans was rated Class 4, equivalent to any large-bodied, aggressive terrestrial species, capable of harm in the right context, but containable, predictable, bounded by the same physical laws that bound everything else. Soren Kale wanted confirmation. He sat in the observation tier with 2 compact analysts and said almost nothing for the first 2 hours, which was the last unremarkable period of the entire session. I ran the standard battery first. Grip resistance load, thermal gradient tolerance, respiratory function under low oxygen partial pressure. All came back elevated above the Class 4 baseline. Not alarming. Some individual variation exists within any species. I noted the figures, recalibrated the escalation steps, and moved to the next tier. The stress battery begins where standard physiology ends. It is designed to find the ceiling, the point at which the body's own systems begin issuing shutdown commands, and the organism stops. Every species has a ceiling. It is biological law. The cessation signals are involuntary, non-negotiable. They exist because organisms that ignore them die, and evolution selects against dying. Pain, fatigue, oxygen debt, lactic cascade. These are not suggestions. They are commands the body sends to itself, and every organism in the record obeys them. I increased the thermal gradient to the upper threshold, documented for the human species. The subject's skin conductance spiked. His heart rate climbed. His face showed the physiological markers of acute discomfort. I had the expression coding overlay running, but he did not stop. He did not sit. He did not ask for the session to end. I logged it as high pain tolerance and pushed to the next tier. The oxygen reduction brought his blood oxygen saturation into a range that, in every comparable mass species we have assessed, produces involuntary motor impairment within 6 minutes. Loss of fine coordination first it, then gross motor function, then loss of consciousness as the body shuts non-essential systems to protect the brain. It is not a choice the organism makes. It is a compulsory command sequence. At 9 minutes, the human's coordination had degraded. I saw it in the grip test readings, but he remained present. When I spoke to him through the panel intercom to confirm he was still responsive, he answered in 2 words, flat, almost bored. One of the compact analysts said something to Soren Kale. I could not hear it through the observation glass, but I saw Soren Kale's secondary eyelids close, which is what they do when a Veraki is recalculating a position they believed settled. I brought the oxygen back up and waited for him to recover. He recovered faster than the model predicted. That detail went into the log without comment, but I noticed it, and I suspect Soren Kale did too. Third tier is where I lost the instrument panel. The progressive resistance load, a standard measure of sustained output ceiling, uses cumulative mechanical stress to push the musculature past sustainable contraction. The organism's own nervous system sends the stop signal when the lactic acid accumulation crosses a threshold that makes further contraction physiologically counterproductive. Every organism stops. They stop because their own body tells them to, and the body does not lie to itself. The human's lactic markers crossed the threshold. I watched it on the panel. The precise moment the shutdown command would have issued, precise moment his body told itself to stop. He did not stop. The panel that flatlined was not broken. I pulled the diagnostic after the session. It was functioning correctly. What it was recording was a sustained output load that, according to the model, was impossible to produce after the cessation command had been issued. The command had been issued. He had simply not obeyed it. I ran the panel check twice. I brought in the secondary technician, Vael, and asked him to look at the readout without telling him what I thought it showed. He looked at it for about 40 seconds. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the readout. He said it was probably a calibration error. I told him I had already checked calibration. He did not offer another explanation because there was not one. He left without saying anything further, and I did not blame him. Then I sat down. Is not something I typically do during an active session. It took me 11 minutes to find the correct framing for what I was observing, and even then I am not certain the framing is adequate. The human nervous system had received its own body's shutdown command and had routed around it, not suppressed it. The pain signals were present. The fatigue markers were present. Every indicator of cascade failure was on the chart. The body had issued every legitimate signal that should have produced cessation, and the nervous system had looked at those signals and continued anyway. In 41 years, I have never seen that. Not once. Not in any species profile in the Varaki record, which covers 11,000 documented organisms across 4 galactic quadrants. Every biology we have encountered has a ceiling, because every biology must. The ceiling is not a design flaw. It is what keeps organisms functional over time. You stop when the body says stop because the body is protecting itself. Humans, it appears, have a nervous system that can decide the body is wrong. I called a hold on the session and contacted Director Vel Saroth, the institute head. I gave him 4 data points over the secure channel. He told me to terminate the assessment and meet him in the records room. I did. The conversation with Soren Kale happened afterward in the corridor. He stood very still while I summarized the session findings. The rocky stillness of that degree usually means the individual is revising a significant number of held beliefs simultaneously. He asked me one question: whether the result was reproducible. I told him I had no reason to believe it was specific to this individual. The trait, if it held across the species, was structural, wired in, not acquired, not augmented, not a statistical outlier. We would need a larger sample to confirm the prevalence. But the mechanism I had observed was not the kind of thing that appears once in a population. He thanked me and left to file his own report with the Compact Authority. My report is shorter than his will be. I will not speculate on threat classification. That is not my department. What I will state for the record is this: the human body is not bounded by the shutdown commands its own nervous system issues. It receives those commands, processes them, and in the right context overrides them. What determines the context is not a physical threshold. It is not a chemical trigger. It is something that does not appear anywhere in our models, because we have never had to model for it. We have a term in xenobiology, the point at which an organism's physiology falls outside the parameters of its own survival logic. We call it a mapping error. We assume, when we find one, that we have made a mistake in the data. We go back and look for the error, because the error is always in our measurement. This time, I went back 3 times. The data was correct. The organism was the anomaly. The human was returned to holding after the session. He had eaten the meal he was given, asked for water, and slept for 6 hours. The overnight monitoring logs showed normal rest phase biometrics. No distress markers, no elevated cortisol. When the night technician checked on him in the morning, he was doing something with his hands, a low-effort physical exercise, from what the log entry describes. Routine movement. Maintenance. The technician noted it without concern. I read that entry 3 times before I understood why it unsettled me. He had been through the assessment. His body knew what it had been asked to do, and his response afterward was to do more. The Class 4 threat file was formally reviewed by the Compact Authority the following week. I was not consulted on the outcome. I have since heard, from colleagues at 2 other institutes, that the Compact's assessment teams are being asked to develop new intake protocols, humans and subjects. The old ones apparently assumed a ceiling.